What greatness had not floated on the ebb of that river into the mystery of an unknown earth? Joseph Conrad. I rang Freud and he told me to meet him on the South Bank, outside the National Theatre bookshop. Marty came along because there was nowhere else to take him. Since his outburst at Kev, he slumped inside again, as if life had shrunk to a stone in the ungainly husk of his frame. I kept thinking of what he'd said. I'm already a dead man. I told him that probably the only thing keeping us safe was that Brissett didn't know if I had anything on him. A little knowledge may be a dangerous thing, but so is a little uncertainty. Marty shrugged. He'd given up on everything, especially himself. He was looking for atonement. He craved oblivion. Freud was leaning on a rail looking down on a small strip of beach by the Thames, where a white-haired, ruby-faced man sat on a small canvas garden chair, an electric organ balanced on his legs, playing and singing Beatles songs tunelessly and with gusto. A towel spread before him had a few coins in it. We approached Freud, who smiled down at the elderly busker. There are worse ways to spend an afternoon, Freud said without looking at us. This is Marty Hebden, I said. Freud looked at him and nodded. Pilgrim under a curse? Give me your wallet, he said. I gave it to him. He took out a £20 note, gave my wallet back, and folded the note into a paper aeroplane, then launched it over the wall, where it soared, arced, and then spiraled down to land at the busker's feet. He was just about to hurl himself into a spirited rendition of Lady Madonna when he saw the note and stopped. He picked it up, unfolded it, smelled it, looked at Freud, and saluted. Freud showed a few rotting teeth and then made a fluttering gesture with his right hand. The busker packed up and left. You didn't see the ferryman just now? The flash? The rowing? The head? The wave? No, I didn't, I said. It's because he's close. He's coming, no longer just in your unconscious, stepping out of that dark cave and into the pit of the world. Let us go down to the water. And he took Marty's hand and led him like an orphan child down the steps. Marty stared vacantly ahead, indifference hollowing out his inclinations. I followed. We sat on a few stones looking at the lapping brown-grey waters. What news on the woman, Rook? She's married to a doctor. She has a son. She's happy. Freud frowned and looked long and hard at the waters. Happiness, vastly overrated. For imbeciles. The moment you mentioned my name, she looked over your shoulder to see if I was there. Panic set in. The day she dreads had arrived, when the past rears up like a fiery goat to buck her into her darkest places and infect her dreams. But you reassured her. You said you would never tell me where she is, so she sunk back into her glove of imaginary safety. Exactly as you say, I said. Marty had stood and wandered away a little. This great bad boy, built like a lanky piece of trellis, who had probably caused grievous violence to many, seemed to be disappearing into a black hole inside himself. Freud sighed. Now then, Brissot is an anal retentive. Everything has to be just so. He is a prince of vanity in a spectrum of quirks, one of which is that he has triskaidekaphobia, an abnormal fear of the number 13. So if you want to spook him, play on that. Appeal to his vanity and then insult it, and he may, I say may, take risks. Your friend appears to be intent on not waving, but drowning, which is where we came in. I looked and Marty was wading into the Thames. The water was up to his neck, but he kept trudging forward. It lapped over his mouth and his head disappeared. Shit, I said, and jumped up. I ran along the bank and shouted to the bubbles on the choppy water. Marty, for God's sake! But what is the point of shouting to a drowning man who can't hear you anyway? I turned to Freud for help, but he'd disappeared. How could he leave so quickly? Not for the first time, I thought. He was a changeling goblin, a sprite of everything dark. I looked up, but no one up there on the embankment path seemed to have seen what happened. How could a man wade into the Thames in front of the National Bloody Theatre in broad daylight and no one see him? I took off my shoes, because that's what they do in the movies, and it's silly not to if you wish to swim, and started to push in. If you ever try to save someone from drowning in the Thames, bring Wellingtons, because it's not as easy as it sounds. Your feet suck into sludge or wormy clay that makes it impossible to move. I had to pull each foot out with my hands. How did Marty do it so effortlessly? Perhaps if you want to top yourself, the river lends a willing hand. Why couldn't anyone see? Why wasn't someone else taking responsibility? I managed to somehow stagger in until the water was up to my chest, but by then I had no idea where Marty was. A speedboat went by and created waves that lapped over my head and choked me. I hate people who own speedboats. I spluttered and shouted to anyone, but anyone wasn't listening. Then about 4 meters to my left, Marty surfaced like a baby whale, spluttered, and then went down again. Perhaps it isn't as easy to drown yourself as it might seem. I swam towards him, then I ducked under. God, the water was filthy, impossible to see anything and tasted like death. I scrabbled around like a dyspeptic crab, my fingers in all kinds of sluggy detritus. Then I fell over something big and it turned out to be Marty. I hauled him up and we both broke the surface with a volcano of spluttering and coughing. "Let me go," he shouted in my face. I spat out chloric spume and took a deep breath. My eyes swam. "No, think how bad it would look if I tried to save you and fail. I'll never get my life-saving badge." Something in him slumped and he let me drag him as I would a dead man. Then we both staggered through the sucking mud and fell like giant twin soggy mud-brown condoms on the filthy shore. I took some deep breaths and wondered why life was so difficult. A sound I didn't instantly recognise started to claim my attention, and I looked up to see some 50 people leaning over the wall applauding and shouting things like, "Well done, mate!" and "Bloody hero!" It infuriated me. I stood up bedraggled and sopping, something brown and disgusting on my left shoulder, and shook my fist at the little cheering crowd. "I'm not a hero. Heroes make me puke. They're always bland and sugary and doing good things, the bastards. The only reason I saved this idiot is because he owes me money." This stopped them and deflated the moment. Someone spat over the wall. A man in a flat cap stuck a middle finger at me. People walked away and the show was over. But a little aside, another stood, watching, waiting, his face still shadowed beneath the fedora hat. He pointed 2 fingers and cocked a thumb at me, took a shot, and walked away.